Welcome to the second installment of our video dialogues, which are part of a FemTechNet class, Dialogues in Feminism, Technology and Culture, which Lisa Nakamura and I run at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. I would like to especially welcome Marina Gorzinic out there, who will be watching this video and unfortunately who could not be here today to speak to Catherine. I'll do my best to fill that spot, and I hope indeed that Marina will be able to be on this campus in the spring semester. I also would like to start by saying that I really, for this particular session, there was a blog prompt as a part of our class about what you think, what kind of place creativity has in your lives and in your own production and in your own thinking about technology as well. And those blog posts were amazing. I thank you very much for putting them up and inspirational, and I hope that for our final project you will build on those skills and on those ideas which you express there. My name is Irina Aristarkova, and I'm really happy to introduce Catherine Bihar, who is with us today. Catherine Bihar is a Brooklyn-based interdisciplinary artist whose work includes performance, interactive installation, video, and writing about digital culture. Bihar's work appears at festivals, galleries, performance spaces, and art centers worldwide, including the Museum of Contemporary Art, North Miami, Judson Church in New York, Inno Actu in Dresden, the Girls Club Collection in Miami. Sounds great. Mm-hmm. I would love to check it out. Feldman Gallery plus Project Space in Portland, the Bali Center for Culture and Politics in Amsterdam, the Mediations Biennale in Poznan, the Chicago Cultural Center, the Swiss Institute in Rome, the National Museum of Art in Cluj-Napoca, and many others. She is the recipient of fellowships from the MacDowell Colony, Art Journal, and the Rubin Museum of Art, and grants including the Franklin Furnace Fund, the U.S. Consulate in Leipzig, the Illinois Arts Council, and the Cleveland Performance Art Festival. When you do so much, you have to sit through this and listen. Her ongoing projects include two collaborations, the performance art group Disorientalism, which has something to do with Lisa Nakamura's work apparently, with Marianne Kim, and the art and technology team Raise Implement, with Ben Chang and Sylvia Ruzanka. Bihar's writing on technology and culture have been published in Literal, Media and Parsons Journal for Information Mapping, Visual Communication Quarterly, and Extensions, the online journal for embodied technology. She's an assistant professor of New Media Arts and Baruch College, Manhattan. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you.
I would like to start with our with a wider question, and it's also a historic question, in a way about the early cyberfeminist writing, which I presented to our class earlier, and a lot of it was inspired by literature and art. A lot of early writing, feminism, gender, and technology was inspired by creative work, and I'm specifically thinking about VNS Matrix, OBN, feminist science fiction. What is it in the creative project that contributes so much to the intersection of technology and feminism?
Okay. So, can you guys hear us okay? Sort of? So I feel like we have all of these microphones, but I'm not hearing the microphones. So, but as long as you can hear me, that's what I care about. In terms of thinking about this relationship between art, feminism, and technology, right? I think that I'm not really sure what art's main contribution is to that intersection, right? And I think that that's something that I'm constantly trying to think about in my work. I don't really have an answer for it. But in terms of thinking about what art's contribution might be to feminism or what art's contribution might be to technology taken separately. For me, the main thing that art offers either one of these fields is an opportunity to be a little bit less serious, and an opportunity even to be wrong, right? I think that that sounds a little bit scary, right? Especially in terms of feminism, right? When we're thinking about politics, no one really wants their politics to come down on the wrong side of history, right? But I think that creative thinking and creative practices allow us to maybe embrace a different way of going about things. And I think that art gives feminism, specifically, a model of praxis. So there has been historically a connection between feminist work and material practices. And I'm thinking about the history of women's work and sort of embracing women's material work. But I think that as feminism has sort of moved into the academy, one of the things that we find is that it becomes a little bit less invested in material practices and more in what I would call more idealistic concepts. So art is a way for feminism to reinvest in material practices. Technology is an applied field, right? So maybe it needs a little bit less help with praxis. But what I think art really gives to technology is an opportunity to be a little bit counterproductive, to be maybe non-utilitarian, to have a different kind of imaginary that's going beyond the typical engineering imaginary of productivity. In a feminist, I want to show you, we have these extra slides in here from student blogs. I read your blog posts and they're amazing, and I want to talk about them. But I think maybe do you want to come back to these, or do you want to talk about these now? Should we do?
Sure, we can just mention it.
Yeah. These are Irina's slides.
The first one is my selection.
Yeah.
And it says, creativity was how I was able to digest and restructure an unfair world. I found that writing is necessary to process, create, and implement the change we want to see in the world. And again, our blog is anonymous, so you don't have to identify yourself, but I really was amazed at reading and how deeply you thought about what creative practice means to you and what it does to you differently than a class like this is. And another one I wanted to show you is I absolutely believe that digital media will be important for imagination in my generation. I think that the interactivity that digital media allows creates the possibility for people to get creative with the ways in which we interact. And something which probably we can pick up later and continue talking is that what amazes me when I teach, how much more I learn about you online, in digital projects. That the depth, that you come alive in really different way, and I noticed it in blended classroom as well, and I appreciate it a lot. And again, it's a different level of identity, which sometimes we, as professors, see, or intimacy that we don't get to in a classroom.
So there's one more in here, and I actually maybe would like to come back and talk about this poet's work maybe a little bit later in the discussion. But to get back to this issue of being wrong, my favorite is these are two examples from my work. And I'm realizing the slides are a little behind me. So on the left is a still from a video that I made with my collaboration, Disorientalism, with Marianne Kim, that's called Plugging Away. And on the right is a screen capture from a project called Willy Nilly by my other collaboration, Resimplement, with Ben Chang and Sylvia Rosanka. And without going too much into these pieces, this is sort of what I mean by being wrong. The Willy Nilly project is a set of behaviors that you can get for your avatar in Second Life. remember Second Life? Who remembers Second Life? But the idea was that Second Life is supposed to be a virtual world, right? And it was supposed to be just like the real world. But in the real world, things happen, like you fall down, right? So the willy-nilly behaviors, this is our clumsiness behavior that makes avatars just trip and fall over nothing. So instead of tripping over an obstacle, sometimes you just fall down, and which happens in real life, right? There were also two other behaviors. One was erectile dysfunction during cyber sex, and another was aging. Right? Like you've perfectly designed avatar, and the avatar might age. What would happen? And the other one is Plugging Away is a video where we're working with this thing called the Disso plug. So we're doing all of these explorations of exploring this thing. And what it is a kumquat and an RCA plug. And it's a whole narrative that comes around this. That's about the production and use of this thing. So the question is, what makes these projects feminist, right? And for me, it's really about kind of confusing the imaginary or confusing the kinds of categories that that result in binary thinking, right? Trying to like subvert binaries. And it might be, feminists traditionally work at trying to subvert the gender binary, right? But I'm here trying to extend that logic in perhaps a slightly illogical way to subvert the kumquat RCA plug binary, right? The binary of the organic and the inorganic. Right? And I think that this is really part of a broader project of trying to give a visual body to material engagements that don't result in difference, where you end up with this weird composite thing, right? So this is sort of what I'm trying to get at with the work. And your question also asked about inspiration. And for me, I would just say I think inspiration is a very personal matter. You find inspiration in strange places. Perhaps you, as a writer, might find inspiration in artwork. I also, as an artist, most often find inspiration in writing. So actually, your book, Lisa's book, Cybertypes, has a bit in the beginning, and I think it's in the introduction, that talks about the double disorientation that people of color experience in the early days of the internet. So the early internet was heralded for being a place that sort of decentered experience. But if you're already on the periphery, you're already decentered, then it's this kind of double disorientation, which was part of the inspiration for naming my collaboration Disorientalism, actually, sort of combining this idea with Edward Said's idea of Orientalism. So I just say it cuts both ways. So, yeah.
Maybe going a little bit off script and to just ask a question of what prompted you, because your work is so fused with technology and this organic, unorganic, and the playfulness of it. Where does it come from in your personal history? What prompted you to get excited about technology?
That's a great question. So in my early work, I was, during my undergrad, I was working with performance primarily. And I was creating these performance installations, and this was in the late 90s. And it was, of course, the time when when net art was happening. I wasn't doing net art, but I was really interested in this idea of sort of my feminist interest in creating a non-binary body was taking the form of a lot of conjoined performers or hermaphroditic performers. So I was really trying to look at a body that did not reduce into a simple binary. And at that time, took a course actually in undergrad that was looking at virtual reality, which at that time was supposed to be like, instead of a TV, people were going to have a cave in their living room. And it was a really great course that paired people in our art and technology program, so really people heavily working with technology, with people in our sculpture program, so people like me who weren't using technology at all, right? And I was really inspired by this idea of a double space, and I started trying to represent that. So my my first sort of brush with technology in my work was actually technology as the subject of my work. So this idea of a virtual reality as another form of doubling that tries to replace but doesn't, right? So a very problematic kind of doubling. And that sort of led me into eventually wanting to work more directly with technology and take that as the subject of my critique.
Thank you. So I think in terms of your own work, I know that you have some other examples of it, how it engages with technology directly, and so maybe just elaborate a little bit more. I know you have a lot there for us.
I have a lot of examples of work. Do you guys want to see some examples? Yeah. Okay, good. Because I think that sometimes that's the easiest. It's easiest to see art and talk about it instead of sort of in the abstract thinking about art. So basically, I think that some of the, in some ways, I'm trying in my work to take the experience of digital subjects and draw an analogy to the experience of women and post-colonial subjects, basically, and say that being a digital subject, participating in digital culture, just participating, right, leads to a similar kind of exploitation and oppression that women and colonial subjects experienced, right? So that is a really broad statement, right? And I'm making that statement allowing that it could be a little bit wrong, right? Like that's a wild claim. But I'm saying that because that allows me to then investigate that in my artwork, right? So the first piece that I would like to show you is, here we go, yeah. So this is a piece called Pipe Cleaner, and it's a cross-platform screensaver. So some of you may recognize 3D Pipes, which is an old Microsoft Windows screensaver from the late 90s. And I used the screensaver as a setting for an intervention. And I see this as kind of a post-feminist take. So I inserted a pole dancer into the maze of pipes. And she's wearing a dress that's made out of cleaning gloves. And in addition to dancing, she's trying to clean and polish the pipes. So essentially, she's doing the same kind of maintenance work. In addition to sex work, she's doing the same kind of maintenance work that the screensaver itself does, right? Because the screensaver is designed to keep your screen in good condition, right? But in the screensaver, she's her dance moves are getting edited in a kind of absurd recombinant logic, like the screensaver itself, and she's constantly being tracked and overwritten in the pipes. So one part of this piece that I like to bring out also is that it's a screensaver, right? So most artwork you're supposed to look at, right? Like sculpture, painting, you're supposed to look at it. The screensaver is something that plays on your screen when you've stepped away from the screen. So it's something that, maybe at best you catch it in your peripheral vision. So this is something that's really, it's a piece that I'm kind of making for a machine rather than for a human viewer. So it's kind of a gift, in a sense, a human, non-human gift. The next piece that I'd like to show you. Oh, yeah.
I have a question. If we go back a little bit, and
Yeah.
Just last week we had a lecture on labor and
Yes.
the role which, especially labor by Native American women, and how that labor was. Liza Nakamura was talking about it. That's right, the subject of her book, and it's very interesting to see. I think for you it's also interesting how the same kind of subject matter can be approached in a really different way, right? And what one learns, so what a different reality it creates. And
Right.
and earlier today we talked about it, how it's possible to write a book, it's possible to make work, but it's different register that it responds to. It doesn't. One is not better than the other.
Right.
But humor is something which seems to go through a lot of your works, and I
Yes.
think we will come back to the topic again. And it resonated with Rosie Braidotti's point in that cyberfeminism with a difference early
Yes.
article,
Yes.
but the way in which you are in a way not just recording what already happened to post-colonial subjects, so neo-colonial subjects, but you're also subverting it, and you're also imagining what might be a different future for it.
Yes. Yes.
So I find that to be really a different mode of being, and at the same time of opportunity, which I
Right.
feel there. That it's not just a mode of critique, but it's also a mode of subversion.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
I really
Thank
love
you.
that word.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that a lot of the subject matter, it can be really heavy, right? I mean, it's serious, it's real, it's people's lives, right? And when I say that I'm willing to be wrong, or willing to try to take things a little bit less seriously, that's also really partly it's a tactic. It's a tactic for being able to, to try to subvert something, or to try to have a different relationship with this subject matter, or to create, hopefully, to create a different kind of relationship for people who see this work, right? So the next piece is in a totally different register. I think it's funny. I don't know if you'll think it's funny. So this is a piece where I'm trying to, okay, there we go. Where I'm trying to put my body on the command line. So the project is called Hexed, and in it I am trying to perform the labor that the machine does for color mixing. So this is a very arcane process, basically. Not so interesting. But what I'm trying to do is reimagine it, kind of like what you're talking about, to make it to make it more interesting, but also to make it a little bit perhaps magical or mystical. And I perform as a cybernetic sorceress who divines color by typing. So Hexed, the title, refers both to the German meaning of the word, which is one who uses black magic, so it's like a witch. Also a feminist subject, right? And then also to hexadecimal codes, which are 6-digit alphanumeric codes that are used for determining color on websites. So what I'm typing, I'm basically using this red divining rod, and I'm mounted up on the wall, and I'm using a red laser keyboard to type with the, oh, this is really dark. You can't see the projection so well. Maybe it's a little better in there. So I'm typing on this red laser keyboard, and what you're seeing are, it's changing the colors that are projected back over my body. So the letters and numbers that I'm typing are hexadecimal codes that change the color of the projection. So I was thinking with this that I wanted to go sort of back to basics. I'm wondering, is it possible to turn down these overhead lights? Because I'm seeing that the projection is really quite dark. Maybe we can see a little bit.
I think it's also because of the video.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. So we're lighting the video, but we're washing out the projection. Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's keep going. So, This one you can see a little bit more with the keyboard. So with this project, I was thinking about kind of trying to go back to basics. And I was thinking about color mixing for artists as being this kind of fundamental activity that's really magical and beautiful, but also very scientific in terms of mixing pigments and the chemicals in paint. And then I was also thinking about typing as being a kind of fundamental activity for computer users. There's a great book by Neil Stephenson called In the Beginning Was the Command Line that talks about how before the graphical user interface, one had to type in order to interact with a machine. So then I was thinking about this activity of typing, and I thought, okay, if you have this and then you take away the keyboard, it looks like somebody casting a magic spell. So this is sort of how this piece came about. One more image, and then here's a little bit of video of the performance. We'll see if this is light enough.
C 0 0 0 0 8 8 3 D 4 7 D 2 C line D 8 5 2 8 0 D 0
So this idea of trying to embody the computer, right? For me, this is a gesture of solidarity. It's like worker solidarity or feminist solidarity. I'm trying to take on some of the labor that the computer performs. But also historically, I'm not the first person to embody being a computer. And I'm very much inspired by the next couple of images that I'm going to show you. Again, this is from text, right? I encountered these readings in an essay by Jennifer Light, and also one by Wendy Chen. So the fact is that before computers were machines, computers were women. A computer wasn't a thing, it was a job. So have people seen these images? Yes, you've seen these images, great, so you know. These are two computers, women who were paid to perform computation, right? Who are working on the ENIAC machine. And then this image is an image of a male programmer issuing commands to a female computer, which for me really sums it up and is a very powerful image that we still have, right? This imaginary continues, right? And especially as we start to think about these sort of gendered AIs, Siri and such, or the movie Her, Theodore and Samantha in Spike Jonze' movie Her. Let's see, where am I? I'm kind of losing track of myself here. I'm trying to recognize this kind of material historical connection between working bodies and the computer. And one of the things that is, to go back to this issue of labor, is I'm really concerned with the labor that is required for technosocial processes to run. And what these images show is that there is a feminist link between the kind of invisible black boxed labor of the machine and the invisibility of women's work. And here, again, this idea of visibility connects back to this idea that the screensaver is something that's meant for the machine, not for our eyes, right? So the next piece that I'd like to show you is a storefront installation that I created this summer for a space in Jersey City called the Brunswick Window. And the installation is titled High Hopes. So it features a Roomba with a rubber tree strapped to its back, and it's vacuuming a rug to the tune of Frank Sinatra's High Hopes. So the Roomba is programmed to perform with the same kind of fortitude as the little ant in Frank Sinatra's song, who teaches children to keep trying, no matter what, keep trying against all odds. So here is a quick little video of what goes on. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions about this work. What store is this?
So it's actually it's a former store. It's a storefront window that is in front of an artist studio space. So he's created it's Roger Sayre runs the space, and he's basically created a little installation space. But it's a former. I found out, interestingly, that it was a florist shop. So it was sort of like bringing the rubber tree back home in some way.
Can we go back to your image of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I noticed how domestic it feels, and maybe a plant there. What does a plant do? And was it a particular kind of? It feels almost like a mismatch of certain domesticities, as if we are going back to this what is it? Disorientalism of sorts, almost. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I mean, there is sort of a lot of layers going on here. But one of the things that I was really thinking about is this domestic space, right? And the kind of, in some ways, this piece is the reverse of Pipe Cleaner or Hexed, where in those pieces I'm trying to perform the machine's labor. But in this piece, the machine is performing what has traditionally been domestic labor done by humans, right? Vacuuming. But here I'm also really interested in class. And the, people who own Roombas, I mean, that's my Roomba. I'm a person who owns a Roomba. But
How is a Roomba? Is it nice to own?
It's fantastic. Anyone have a Roomba? It's really, so the other part of this story is that I am an artist in New York. As some of you have probably heard, New York apartments are very small. And at some point I ended up making art in my apartment too. So my apartment is both where I live and my studio. And this little robot makes it all possible. Much easier to make a mess and let a robot clean it up. But what I'm trying to think about here with the choices that I've made in the installation is that the sort of like high tech, I have a robot that cleans my floors for me, life, and the life of the reality of vacuuming are sometimes in two different registers. And all of the things that the various home furnishings that are the props in this piece. So the carpet, the curtains. These are really, for me, very carefully chosen to indicate a sort of upward mobility in middle class decor. So it's an effort to have a better life. It's an effort to live elegantly and not have to vacuum, right? I mean, that's the bottom line, right? No one wants to vacuum. So, and then I don't know, the rubber tree plant is really it's from the Sinatra song. So the song is about a little, if people don't know the song, it's a little old ant who's pushing a rubber tree plant. He's got high hopes. This is how the song goes.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know the song.
yeah.
But it also, I find how that little plant also has a certain living, a sense of being a living being, or
Yeah,
something there,
yeah.
which is
Yeah.
right. And again, going back to some of your other work, organic,
Ri-
unorganic,
yes,
right?
that pairing.
Technology and something very emotional, and that particular film, Her. Have you seen it? Oh, I thought it was really well done in
Yeah.
terms of, I don't know what you've thought about it, but it touches on lots of topics of this class and in general,
Yeah.
right, of FemTechNet. There are probably tens of or dozens of films like this today, which are dealing with issues of attachment or intimacy with the virtual, with identities, with technologies, and of course, for me personally, they have lots of unconscious and psychoanalytic
Yes.
references in them. But it's interesting how you connected that to was that slide, and it was very fast.
This one, yeah. So
And how you connected it to a notion of computer, who originally a woman was a computer who was even just doing those calculations,
Right,
And
right.
by herself, she was
she was the
called
computer.
computer.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, without any machine attached
Right,
to her.
right.
For large investment banks and companies like that. So it was again interesting for me how those connections are made, and suddenly I can hear myself
I know.
much better.
Wait, did these just turn
My-
on?
Mine
Whoop.
is on.
Yep. Did. Okay.
So what? Again, I want to pause for a second, because students will are probably thinking or will need to think about their own creative projects, as how, unlike in more academic context, here lots of different things come together, right? That which you don't necessarily need to have a perfect quote or citation for, but nevertheless they do produce results which one can experiment with, and humor and maybe positioning awkward contexts together, that again for you to something to think about. I wanted to pause and note this, how you're throwing in references from the past, but also from contemporary culture. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you want to see more art? Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's go forward for a second. Okay. All right. Oh, so this was about the Roomba. Do you guys know this this reference? So this idea, right, that again, worker solidarity, right? But the word robot, right? A Roomba is a robotic vacuum. So the word robot was first coined in a play called R.U.R. Rossum's Universal Robots, that was by a Czech playwright named Karel Čapek. And this is from the 1920s, I think. And the Czech etymology of the word means forced labor, right? So it's very much about labor within the word itself. So there's kind of a common complaint that we hear about digital culture, that we are slaves to the machine, right? But one of the things that I'm thinking about in pieces like High Hopes and in some recent work that I'm doing now is how machines are also slaves to us, right? We've kind of lost that in our concern with being tied to our phones and things like this. So, and then also when we think about that machines are slaves to us, then what does it say about the movie Her, which I agree was brilliantly done, right? What does it say to have a kind of machine that solicits intimacies, right? That part of the labor that machine does is affective labor. It creates an intimate experience, right? It becomes a friend, a secretary, a mom, a lover, right? And then it also is our slave, right? So that's a very interesting for me and, fraught moment. So in the work that I'm currently engaging, let's see, I think I had a black slide in here. Okay. I'm creating a series of sculptures, which is a new medium for me. And it's a series called E-Waste. And I wanted to show you these because they're not on my website yet. But the idea with these pieces is that it's a post-apocalyptic future. Humans have died off. Maybe it's the climate, who knows, right? But humans are gone. And all of these little USB devices are still destined to work forever. So it's so far in the future that they've sort of become fossilized, but they are still working, they're still functioning, they're still doing whatever it is that they had to do. And in my imagination, there's a moment when maybe the environment, the what's left of the earth, right? So these rocky, stony materials sort of are trying to attach themselves to these devices to kind of give them support, right? So that's the fossilization, ossification process for me. And they're all things like USB corded mice, or there's a lot of laptop cooling fans or platform things. And this one is a USB fan. So they're all still working. They're all still trying to do their thing because that's what they were programmed to do. But now they're sort of an army of workers that is without a sergeant, right, or a general, whatever it is. They're just working blindly. So they just keep churning. One of the ways that I think that this project connects to some of the earlier performance work that I've been doing is really about trying to solicit or create sympathetic systems. So it's kind of a human-machine counterpoint to the kind of coercive cybernetic systems that have really dominated technology and engineering. So this, for me, is very much directly feminist, right? It's an attempt to create a kind of camaraderie that's very much inspired by feminist ideology for me. How are we doing on time? I have two other pieces that I was thinking about showing, but maybe I don't know how. Yeah.
You're still editing me, but you can.
Okay.
I think we can
Yeah.
take another 10-15 minutes.
All right.
But before,
Yeah.
Before you
Do you
move
wanna-
to other
yeah.
pieces, I think and I saw this work actually when they were all like doing that
Yeah.
and, in a little installation in New York, and it also challenged my own thinking about hospitality, a topic I'm interested in, because lots of time we deal with it when we're thinking about should we also be welcoming to animals and to plants, to other living beings. And then in your work, it made me think much more. I never put a machine within this sphere, or if I put it there, I always put it there in terms of extension of the body, the way in which Canguilhem writes about it, right? In Machine and Organism. But I really didn't feel like I want to welcome machines. And I think that in your work, you either showing to us that we're already invested, it's over, it's no longer a question.
Right.
And even I know that some of our students who are writing from engineering point of view, who are here going to engineering college, that they kind of talked about, some of you who've written that we are more academically inclined, we're not really creative. They sometimes engineers block out almost, I feel, the fact that they really love their machines, right, or their laptops,
Yeah.
or it's a kind of, again, I'm trying to say something provocative here, but the fact that that affective labor, or what you're talking about, the intimacy which one feels, and how much it tied back to the notions of masculinity and femininity. That if you are if you're academic, or if you are an engineer especially, and it escapes me the person who wrote effective computing, book where in the introduction, anyway, she's talking about the way in which she always tried to be as an engineer and successful engineer, I think MIT professor, how she always tried to be like a man, which meant for her without emotions, that she can operate in this world. And then it's only years later now when in the AI research, she realized that without making machines feel or be emotionally, remember that emotional IQ, we will never make them think. Right, so she wrote that book, which is groundbreaking for the AI research, for human-computer interaction research, that affect is an important part of logic, of being able to think. And again, it's really fascinating to me how much of it is still governed by, or it's still almost surveyed by, our desires to be masculine or feminine, right? As if and rationality and intimacy, emotion, irrationality is still tied to that. But so I know I moved away from the welcoming machines, but at the same time I think that the work which you are doing, and going back to the question of what does creative work contribute, you are just thinking, wow, you are creating an entirely different world, and those of you who are here creative writers, you know that you are creating a totally different universe in your head. The power of imagination, and here we are left with this cute, little USB ports, all of them, who are just still going like that, and you make us feel that they are cute. You make us feel for them. Together with Roomba, I think, too. And it challenges me in my own thinking about whether I'm too anxious about investing emotionally into my laptop. Maybe it's fine. Maybe I'm already invested. Maybe that's who we are. Maybe I can't think differently. Why am I so anxious if I feel for something, for your machines? Right, so we just had this.
No, thank you. I think there's a great piece also that it's by Karen Gregory, and I'm trying to remember. I think it's on a blog that's something like Digital Labor or something like that. I'm not sure if if you Google it, you'll find it. But she talks also about how so many of these devices are. It's very gendered, like the device itself, right? So things that, my phone is my alarm clock, it's my calendar, it's, all of my reminders, it's how I communicate with friends, it allows me to maintain social relationships, right? And those things like waking you up in the morning and making sure that you get to, wherever you're supposed to be on time, those are things that your mom did, right? Like your mom woke you up in the morning. So this is, I think, a really great, her piece is really succinct about and direct about drawing these kinds of connections. Yeah.
So I was just doing the wrong thing. I was using my phone, which, by the way, my students said we should not do in this class.
Ooh.
We had a session in the beginning where they said
I like that.
Their own. Her name is Rosalind Picard, who wrote Effective Computing.
Okay. Thank you.
She has her own MIT group on effective computing research.
Thank you. Great.
So, please, other work?
Yeah. Okay. Okay, there's two other pieces. I feel like maybe we should do one of the two. Do you want to see a giant iPhone, or do you want to see, I threw in at the last minute, because a bunch of you guys had blogged about gaming. So would you rather see a piece with video game or a piece with a really big iPhone? Video games, I thought so. All right. Okay, we'll flip through the video game just really quickly. Or through the iPhone. So this is a piece called 3G56K. It's a really large, this is not a great one to show because it's so dark, but it's that black thing is a really big iPhone, and it is It has a functioning touch screen. People can walk on it and dial. There's a performance that happens. That's a dialing performance. And what's happening is that this, at the time, the 3G was the new thing, right? So it has a love affair with a dial-up modem. So that black cord leads over to a dial-up modem inside of this really big pink phallic tower computer, and it prints out a page of facts. So as you're, this is sort of another role reversal, right? Where instead of humans connecting through machines, the humans are just fluffers in this like intergenerational BDSM romance. And they're just trying to get the machines to connect. So we're gonna skip the video here, and whoops, okay. This is a couple more shots of this.
The size of your phone, did you copyright it compared to the new iPhone 6?
I know.
New iPhone
This
6,
one doesn't
maybe
bend.
It's gonna be, something like we're gonna log around in a couple of years.
With like, yeah, the forklift. Exactly. Okay, so yeah, it's high tech and low tech. It's little soldered chips in plexiglass with tin foil. So engineers, take note. So the video game aspect is part of, so this requires a little bit of backstory. It's part of a series of works by Disorientalism that's called the Food Groups, where at some point we decided that we needed to make ourselves more ethnically diverse. So we needed to take a kind of equal opportunity approach to race, because my collaborator and I are both more or less Asian, and needed to, when we were performing as Asians, because that's what we just have to show up and we're Asian, basically, as performers. So we decided to try to do these food groups that are based on, when I was in elementary school, there was a thing called the 5 Races of Man that was white, brown, black, yellow, and red were the 5 races of man. And you would like color them with crayons. So this was our, yeah, really. This was our sort of homage to that, was to turn this into a thing about these food characters. And these are the characters that we're embodying. And it's really, this piece is it's a long-term project. We've been working on it for several years, and we're through 3 of the 5. And it is, it's about race and labor in production of food. And it actually very much ties in to the question of affect, because my theory on this is that these characters appear in American advertising at the moment when factory food becomes the norm. So food is no longer made for you by your mom. It no longer has the magic ingredient of love, right? So these characters are used to sort of map affect back onto anonymous mass-produced food, right? So that makes them really information workers, right? They are information, and they're doing this information work as well. So the piece with the video game is from our project on Wendy. It's called Brown Bagging. This is also a reference to this infamous African-American fraternity practice called the brown bag test, where they would hold up a brown paper bag, and if your skin was lighter than the brown paper bag, you could be a member of the fraternity, but if you were darker than the bag, you could not be in the fraternity. So, no, sadly no. So this, there's an installation version of this with bazillions of bags, and yes, we stamped them out. And there's a Connect video game. And we made the game in collaboration with my other collaboration with Ben Chang and Sylvia Rozenka, who are programmers. I'm not a programmer, but all of you who are you who blogged about gaming? I'm going to come asking for help. Give it a minute. So people played this game, and then, and I'll explain a little bit more about the game in a second. Oh, actually, maybe I should just play the video. Okay, so the idea with the game is, okay, so there are these different levels, and you're in Wendy's brown bag factory, but instead of making hamburgers, you have to do these different gaming tasks. So it's not like the repetitive tasks of factory work, it's the repetitive tasks of gaming. So in the first level, you have to jump, and as you jump, you bounce the brown bags off of the floor. I'm trying to find my, okay.
Talents will be recognized and suitably rewarded.
So once you've finished a level, you have to do Tai Chi.
More work energy.
Because Tai Chi helps you generate work energy, right? You can be a more productive worker. So there's this red dot symbol that started out as one of Wendy's freckles and then became a motif throughout all of the piece. And you have to match up your hands and feet to the red balls and get into this Tai Chi thing. I'm going to try to fast forward a little bit if I can find. Okay, there we go. So let's see. All right. Yeah. So yeah, it's goofy, right? So the third level is about gleaning. So gleaning is this. Sorry, it's so hard to see, but those are ketchup plants. Or ketchup plants. They're tomato plants, but you pick up ketchup bottles. So gleaning is sort of a practice of picking up the waste of farming, like things that get kind of dropped in the harvest. So you glean these ketchup bottles, it's kind of like Pikmin. And then you have to do more Tai Chi, which I think we can skip the Tai Chi section. Okay, and then in the last level, it's based on Katamari. So at this point, you have to, you're breaking the factory rules. Can you turn up the volume a little bit? Okay, so it's the voice at the beginning had said, warning, rolling is not allowed on the factory floor. So you're trying to push this red ball and you're rolling up the whole factory and everything is getting into this big jumble. And quality is our recipe is the performance that comes out of this. But basically what happens is you roll up not only the bags and the ketchup bottles and everything, but you roll up the whole factory. So you break free, you're like a liberated worker, and you reach nirvana from your abilities as a Tai Chi master that have brought you to this moment. So.
Quality is our recipe.
So here's the.
Every exit is an entrance to new.
Oh, I guess it just ended. Okay. So this is, at this point, every exit is an entrance to new beginnings, and you reach nirvana, and Wendy's head swirls off into a black void. So part of this installation also had basically 3 videos. There's Biggie, where we contend with a really big brown paper bag on a country road. There's Everyday Value, where we are gleaning ketchup bottles in a tomato hothouse. And then there's one called Deluxe Double, where we are doing a kind of Tai Chi. So I'll just play this video for you too, except that I've lost my cursor. Okay. So,
Okay. I see you have another great slide. I will just show more and more, but maybe it's time for us to take questions. Who would like to go first? Ask Catherine your question. And we have a mic. With a mic. Mic. Yes. That you have your questions, your group questions. Yes, here we go. Please introduce yourself so we have it for posterity. ContactNet.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm a senior, and my group had a question about it actually related to disorientalism.
okay.
So you've sort of tapped into global capitalism and its effect on society and mass culture in these pieces. And specifically in the piece entitled Plugging Away, the all-consuming nature of technology is explored through labor, identity, and race. And do you feel that consumerism has been affected by our ever-increasing modes of technology? And do you believe that technology has sort of blown our concept of being a consumer out of proportion with just how much we're kind of attacked by it every day through computers and advertisements?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yes, yes, the answer is yes. But I also think that what I see happening with the impact of technology and sort of global capitalism, right, on the everyday level, is that I think that it's not just about consumerism at this point, right? That consumerism, there's sort of this triangle, right, between consumerism, being a consumer, being a producer, and being a product, right? So that actually we're in this tangle of all of those roles. So in addition to consuming things that are made, for example, in a factory, we're also producing massive amounts of information, massive amounts of data, right? Not even information, just data. And we are ourselves then, through this data, we become a product, right? So we become something that a corporation can consume. Right, we can pay for our data, for example, right? But also in terms of, sort of non-monetary forms of exchange in social media, we are producing ourselves in a very affective way in social media to try to gain, popularity or likes or reputation, whatever it is that you want to call it. So I think that it's really it's that those three things are becoming increasingly inseparable, right? Being a consumer, being a producer, and being a product. It's almost impossible to divide them now.
Who would like to go next? Please, go ahead.
Should I just talk?
No, if you don't mind using the mic, it's just
sure, I
for our recording purposes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carlina, and I guess I was just really interested in hearing you talk and kind of seeing a lot of the videos and kind of the relationship between like vision and movement within all your projects, and I was particularly interested in like digital movement versus human movement, and it seems like in a lot of your projects there's sort of a intersection between both, with kind of like the Wendy's brown paper bag, and then even like the iPhone with people watching someone perform on top of just the surface. So I was wondering if you could kind of speak about where you find the intersection between human and digital movements within your projects, and is that an intersection, or is that something that you think about while making art?
Yeah, that's also a fantastic question. I think that for me, when I'm working with performance, whether it's live performance or for video, I'm really interested in thinking about these kind of impossible choreographies. So when I work with dancers, for example, there's another body of work that we haven't even really looked at here, where I do work directly with dancers. And they're always saying that they feel like I'm giving them the most impossible things to do, you know. And part of that is trying to come up with sort of a program, almost like an algorithm for generating movement. So when it's a human moving, right, there's something that is programmatic about how I'm approaching the impetus to move. I'm also really interested in how machines force us to move in certain ways, right? And in these kinds of gestures. There's a series of videos that I'm working on now that are called Modeling Big Data, where I'm trying to I'm thinking about big data and thinking about how big it is, right? And trying to take that into my body. So I'm in this costume that's like a big blob, basically, and I'm performing what I'm calling data gestures. So the gestures are things like clicking, buffering, pinging, and caching information, so getting bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So that is a way that sort of thinking about a very sort of abstract kind of technological movement that we don't see necessarily is informing the kinds of things that I try to do in performance. So, thanks.
Excellent. Another group question? Make sure. Yes. Go ahead. Mike, can you please?
I'm Sarah, and I'm a freshman. And so our group, our question was, art has been constantly evolving with advances such as video or the internet. Has this changed how you work or present your art? How can these advances reach certain target audiences that traditional art may not?
So for me, I think that the way that it's impacted me personally is maybe less about like the traditional narrative of sort of giving people more access. I mean, I think it does do that. I think people can see my work much more easily. But Irina and I had a whole discussion at one point about the decision to put video online or not to put video online. And for me, I think what I've found is that I see a lot of work online, so I do want to be putting more video online, especially now. I think Vimeo, the quality is so good that it's worth doing. Like there was a period when video online looked really bad and it wasn't worth doing for me. But now I feel like I am interested in sharing my work that way. What I find is a bigger change that I've noticed, though, is less about access and more about attention. So what I think happens is that while non-art audiences and art audiences may have access to the work online, the kind of attention that people spend with something is much more peripheral, right? So it's not the kind of deep attention that work that has been very influential for me, like the history of endurance performance and durational performance installations and things like that. That work does not translate well online, and I think increasingly is difficult offline because people are so trained in this sort of quick understand something, move on to the next thing, scan through the video, right? Watch, maybe 2 minutes of a 10-minute video, definitely not a 3-day performance, So I think that it's really changed the temporality that people are operating in, everyone, whether they're art audiences or not. Yeah.
We had another question there.
Oh, did you have a question?
Yeah, just to build off of that. I'm Joey, I'm a senior, I don't know if this is on, okay. And I know you talked about, in the beginning, like not being afraid to be wrong. So when you have your work on the internet, and perhaps it's hard to sort of understand, or maybe more abstract, how much does it play into your, or how conscious are you of maybe other people won't correctly understand this, or like, is that even a bad thing? So I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, you know, for me personally, I think that as I get older, I'm less concerned with that, to be honest with you. I mean, I do usually try to contextualize my work with some sort of short statement about it. Like on my website, I always have a little blurb that describes it, a little statement about it. And you know, when I have things on Vimeo, I always put the same little blurb, right? So that there's some kind of a context for things. But I think for me, what was more concerning, and again, part of this question about do I put video online or not, was less about people understanding the work and more about this idea of remixing. And I feel like I'm less concerned about that now. So the idea that, you know, politically, I want to support a sort of a copyleft idea or a Creative Commons idea of everyone can use everything and remix everything. But I don't really want that done with my own work because I think that it's so close to popular culture, right? It's already very close. So I think that that's maybe more the concern about taking something out of context. It's less about the context that I provide, which I feel like I can do my best, and more about something getting taken totally out of context and reused for other purposes that are, you know, I'm a little bit of a control freak underneath. Scratch me and you get a control freak. So, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions?
Hi, I'm Liza. I'm a sophomore. And I had a question about some of your other work that was on your site, specifically work that looks into and possibly critiques anthropology and archaeology as fields, such as like 2x2, view by view, where the disorientals kind of learn what this urban leisure, I guess, looks like. And excuse me, I forget the name of the video, where they take urban artifacts.
Right, okay, yeah. It's an archaeology of the mistaken present.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if, in looking into kind of archaeology and anthropology and the way in which, you know, it's been largely written by white men looking out into cultures that are deemed quote unquote exotic, if the internet or you think that digital art forms have the ability to rewrite what is exotic?
It's another great question. Okay, I think that, let me think about this for a minute. So the question is whether digital forms allow me to rewrite what's exotic.
And whether, I would add to a great question, whether you think they're more effective in a way just because of the nature of the digital versus something which is analog.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, what I'm trying to do as an artist in some ways is to either make the exotic normal or make the normal exotic, right? And I think that digital technologies are very good for that because they are so ubiquitous, right? So there is a kind of leveling effect that HD video has, for example, or that the internet has. And I don't mean a leveling effect in terms of, you know, hierarchies of knowledge necessarily, but more of a leveling effect of it's in this medium, and we can treat everything in this medium with the same kind of epistemology. So for me, I am trying to, I mean, I think that's such a great characterization of the projects. And I am trying to sort of think in terms of not just making something that has been exotic non-exotic, but also bringing a sense of estrangement to what we see in everyday life. So the archaeologies of the mistaken present, for example, we are kind of encountering, I mean, we're going through the streets of New York with magnet brooms and we're picking up anything that's metal. And then we try to create a new taxonomy for these things using found text, which is all of these abbreviations. So it's like LOL stands for, I can't even remember what it is in the piece, but some use that we've decided that this piece of trash must be used for in this strange society that we've encountered. So it's a way of recontextualizing or encountering something that is normal, like trash, and thinking about it in a different way. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question, and maybe we can take the break after asking this question. These are wonderful pieces of work. I'm just so impressed.
Thank you.
I think that the people in this group may be inspired by some of the things that you did, because not all of them require huge amounts of technical engineering, as you said. And some of them were in collaboration with people who had those skills, and some of them you just kind of did on your own, which is amazing. The Roomba piece I thought reminded me of that movie WALL-E. Because you kind of feel bad for the movie. It just keeps on going around, and you feel like this futility, but also this persistence, as you say, which is so moving in a way. And so I wanted to talk about aesthetics and gender, and how it is that some things are seen as girly technologies, and how and when the girly is in opposition to the technological. And I say it because in our class we talked about technology and style early on, and how some things like Game Boys were marketed as girly, or some objects that are technological are marketed as sparkles, and some were not. And so how when you approach technology as a maker or critic, where the line between girly and not girly falls.
Yeah, wow. I don't know that I have a clear answer for that. I think that, a lot of the work I am sort of playing with a sense of cuteness, maybe, that also could be girly. And I'm also, of course, playing with humor. And I think that, I don't know if this gets into I haven't really thought about how this plays into gender, but of course it does, right? But I think that this idea of, I often feel, I'm not a programmer. I often feel alienated and overwhelmed by technology. And I'm trying on some level to make these technologies approachable, right? And that certainly, this gets into hospitality, right? And how that is gendered. So the things that I'm using, cuteness, girliness, humor, those are all things to try to create these kind of what I've been calling sympathetic systems, right? To allow us to have these kind of moments of camaraderie with a piece of technology, with a phone, with a mouse, right? And of course they're gendered, right? That idea of intimacy is gendered. Sure. Thanks.
Maybe just to add to that and to wrap up, definitely in a way, because we need to go on our break. And, that I think the word estrangement that you used before in my own work, I also think about it, because we are so much, there are things which we can do, and there are things that done to us. And as much as we can try to redefine those girly, non-girly in relation to technology, there are also things that they do to us. And if, let's say, one is, what I find very interesting is that when we manage rather than reversal, when some people try to not, when they move into issues of the technological, they would like to drop everything girly, right? And what I like, I think, or what challenges me in the work, where among us, whether it's in the work or in everyday life, where we learn how not to assume anything, right? Even if not to assume a particular identity or particular gender, where we do leave space for self-identification, even where, like in the work of Catherine's, one is almost like lured towards assuming how she presents herself and how she goes it over the top. Also, just to make sure we get it on record, if you go back to that slide which we wanted to go to.
Yeah.
And who is it from you? Do we have here one of you who wrote about poetry? Feminists claim that poetry becomes a way to snatch back the names. Do we have a person?
Yeah. Who?
Yes, I thought it was, I think it was amazing because you had a point there.
Is this the one?
About naming. I don't know if we have it actually.
It might not be in the
we
slide.
might not have it
Yeah.
on the slide, but just to read it up. While technology gives us more opportunities to create new codes of language for our own expression, I think it also tends to extend the project of naming others, other experiences. I think the internet has increased the tendency to give everything a name or category or language. So I think that I really appreciated that contribution, and I think you also, had noticed that particular problem of naming and how that it's not a kind of a struggle that we're necessarily winning or losing, but rather that estrangement.
Right.
More.
And I think that this really goes back. I mean, this is a quote that I noticed as well out of all of the blog posts, and I think that that's so well put, and it goes back to this idea of being wrong, the idea of trying to find a way to not use, names, especially in technology, names become categories, they become, it's a database logic in some sense, right? Tags and taxonomies, and I think that it's a way to, art is a thing that is very good at creating things that don't fit well into categories, right? That don't, ideally that can't be put into known categories, it becomes some other imaginary. And I think that quote from the blogs really gets at the sort of the problems that art is confronted with, yeah.
So thank you very much, Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me.
We're going to take a break and then come back and continue the conversation. Yep.
Yes.